Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, do you like the 80s? Of course you do. That's why you're here watching this review of SummerSlam 1988. If you love your 80s wrestling and if you got thumbs, then you'll love 80s Mania Wrestling Returns, available for iOS and Android. It's a collectible card game meets booking simulator set in the world of the 80s and the 90s. WWE 2K19 still won't have a GM mode, but you can be the GM of your very own wrestling promotion right here, with hundreds of different cards and more wrestling and pop culture references than you can shake a stick at. It's fun and easy to pick up. Earn cash to earn better cards. Play a little, play a lot, those little guys don't mind. WWE doesn't listen to you, but 80s Mania Wrestling Returns does. They're constantly updating the game with the power of user feedback. Download 80s Mania Wrestling Returns for free today, available on Google Play and the App Store. And now, enjoy this review. Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with another classic pay-per-view review as nominated by my Patreon backers. Well, you know what? The month of August has just begun. The build and the hype for SummerSlam is approaching. It's getting really palpable nowadays. So I figure it's only appropriate we look at the very first SummerSlam from August 29th, 1988 in Madison Square Garden in New York City. This show was nominated by Ewan Downey. Ewan, thank you so much for nominating this show on Patreon. So of course, as we all know, SummerSlam is one of the annual institutions of WWE on pay-per-view. It's had some of the biggest moments in company history. So how do we get here? How do we get to SummerSlam becoming this annual institution? Well, of course, in the 80s, as part of the WWF's expansion, they decided to add more pay-per-views over time to transition out of closed-circuit television and more into the traditional pay-per-view route. So, of course, in 1987, they added Survivor Series to their lineup. In 1988, they added SummerSlam, which we're looking at today. And in 1989, they would add the Royal Rumble. Of course, the previous year, it was a special on the USA Network, a 20-man Rumble match. They would make it the official pay-per-view was in 1989, the inaugural pay-per-view in 89, which I've covered before on this classic pay-per-view review segment. 20,000 people have packed Madison Square Garden for this show, a buy rate of 4.5. Your announced team for this evening is Gorilla Monsoon and a horribly, horribly aged Jesse Ventura. My God, what has happened to this man? Oh, never mind, it's actually former WWF champion, superstar Billy Graham, who of course is one of Ventura's biggest influences, so the resemblance is slightly there. Of course, Graham is filling in tonight since Jesse is going to be involved in the main event as a special guest referee. Graham's okay in his role here. I've never heard him do color commentary before this show. He does the job of explaining, how certain moves impact wrestlers' bodies, and he occasionally peers into the minds of wrestlers and what they're thinking as certain things happen in the match. But to me, I thought he was just an okay color commentator. He wasn't the best, but he wasn't the worst either. But the one big takeaway for me on this show was Graham's infectious laughter. Opening match, the fabulous Rougeaus, Jacques and Raymond, take on the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid, who are accompanied at this point in time by their canine mascot, Matilda. She is a very good doggy. She sits on a platform at ringside the entirety of this match, and spoiler alert, it's a very long match, so very well-trained, good doggy Matilda. The Rougeaus are foreign heels because they are French-Canadian, and they carry around American flags saying they love the USA, but fans don't believe them when they say that. Ooh, they're evil, they're foreign, they must be bad guys. So it feels like an oddly relevant gimmick today. Lovely athleticism from Davey Boy early in this match because he cartwheels out of a monkey flip and hits an arm drag on Raymond. Then a few minutes later hits a sweet-ass roll-up. The Bulldogs have the advantage early on, but there's some sneaking by Jacques with the cutoff. Davey Boy takes all the heat for a while, gets a hot tag on Dynamite. Things reach a second act after some outside scuffling. It's like we have kind of like a weird breakdown in the action. Then the match resumes, and it's the Bulldogs are on top again. There's another cutoff by the Rougeaus. Now they're working over Dynamite in the ring, and then Bulldog gets the hot tag, and he's a house of fire and everything. The Bulldogs make their comeback, including a cool assisted diving headbutt by Dynamite, but before anything can happen, suddenly the bell rings, and we reach a time limit 20-minute draw, a 20-minute Broadway here, so there's no conclusive winner. So I'm going to give this match 2 stars out of 4. I think the wrestling itself was very solid, told a great cohesive story, however, it did get repetitive at times. The fact that the second act was very similar to the first in terms of the story they were telling, to me, knocked it down a little bit, as well as the time limit draw. No clear winner here. So I'm only going to give it 2 stars out of 4. It was a very, as far as the wrestling though, very competent, very enjoyable opening match in that respect. This feud would conclude backstage, oddly enough, because one night Jacques Rougeau, who was just sick of the Dynamite Kid and all of his ribbing over an extended period of time, decided to sucker punch Dynamite in the mouth with a roll of quarters in his fist, causing Dynamite to lose several teeth in the aftermath. So that's pretty much how that working relationship ended. Brutus Beefcake was originally scheduled to face the Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Championship in this show, but 1 week before, he was murdered to death by Outlaw Ron Bass. You can see Bass gigging Brutus on the forehead with the cowboy boot spur, which looks pretty brutal. You see a big red X covering the screen in the replay of it, but you can still see the blood pretty clearly at times. Beefcake is taken out of action and will not be able to fight Honky Tonk Man for the championship tonight, but there will be a replacement, and we'll get into that a little later. Our next match pits Bad News Brown versus the Mighty Maccabees' future best friend, Ken Patera, who's rocking some very obvious network dubbed music here at his entrance. Interesting story with Patera at this point, because a year prior to this, he re-debuted for the company after spending 2 years in prison, and that was a result of an altercation at a McDonald's in Washington State with he and Mr. Saito, where one of them, where I think Patera was, who actually threw a rock through a McDonald's window, then got in an altercation with the reporting police officers. So he finally served his time in prison. 2 years for that, came back in '87. He was in the middle of a comeback. He ruptured his bicep tendon, and so was kind of out of action with that for a while. So we were getting a slowed down Ken Patera here. He was years past his peak physical condition, his peak drawing time. He's going here against Bad News Brown. Brown gets a jump on Patera early on, and Ken just gets beat up a lot. He does finally get a shot in on Brown, starts building a comeback. He gets the bear hug in. He goes for the full Nelson a couple of times, but Brown keeps grabbing the ropes. A bit of a botch as Patera whips Brown into the corner. Patera slams himself into the post, ghetto blaster by Brown, and Bad News wins the match. I'm going to give this 1.5 star to 4. Not much to say about this match. It was neither man's best work by any stretch. Patera would be gone for the company shortly after this. Survivor Series 88 would be his last appearance before he'd be gone from the WWF, but he would go on to greater fame, infamy, call it what you will, working those 2 Maccabea Mania shows in the 90s alongside the Mighty Maccabee. Rick Rude is accompanied by Bobby the Brain Heenan, takes on the Junkyard Dog. Rude has JYD's face airbrushed on both sides of his tights. Psychological warfare play for the Ravishing One. JYD with the jump early on, but Rude dodges a headbutt and gets the advantage from there. Dog counters with a low blow, starts making his comeback, but Rude cuts him off after a Bobby Heenan distraction. Rude gets on the top rope, suddenly pantses himself on the top rope to reveal another pair of tights underneath, and whose face is on that but Jake the Snake Roberts' wife, Cheryl Roberts. Her face is all over those tights. I thought it was funny that Rude had to pants himself before falling. He almost forgot to do it. Then when he does it, he comes down. It looks like it's kind of awkward because his pants are around his ankles and his mobility is limited. Anyway, Jake Roberts runs out immediately and jumps Rude in the ring. The match ends in a disqualification. I'm going to give it 1 star out of 4. It's a good match. The DQ finished kind of sucked, but it did play into the greater angle between Rude and Roberts, so I can live with it. Now, the story here is that, weeks earlier, Rude, that was kind of Rude's stick for a while, was going into the crowd, pulling a lady out of the crowd and making out with her in the ring. This one woman he approached wanted no part of it. Turns out she was a married woman. Married to whom? Jake Roberts. And so the story with that, why Cheryl Roberts was there at all, was because she was kind of brought into the company to kind of go on the road with Jake to keep tabs on him, keep him from getting too inebriated, so to speak. Roberts and Rude would continue to feud over Cheryl going into the Survivor Series, which Jake would come out on top. Backstage, the Intercontinental Champion, the Honky Tonk Man, is so confident in his abilities, he doesn't even want Mean Gene to tell him who his replacement opponent is, and boy, won't he be in for a surprise. Up next, the Bolsheviks, Boris Zukov and the recently departed Nikolai Volkov, accompanied by Slick, take on the Powers of Pain, Warlord and Barbarian. Now, the Powers of Pain debuted for the company a couple of months earlier as a babyface team, and it looks like all of a sudden they have a new manager. It's the Baron, aka Baron von Raschke, with some face paint and a hood covering the bulk of his face. That's kind of a weird sign when a tag team debuts and then they add a manager to go along with them. It's also, to me, more of a bad sign when it's a babyface tag team that gets a manager later on, like after their debut. That seems like weird timing to me. And he doesn't do anything in this matchup either, so it's like, why is he even there? Boris goes for a backdrop early on, and Warlord picks up Boris by the head, and Boris does a weird little hop and then crashes down. Some kind of miscommunication there. The Bolsheviks do a tag, the referee misses it, doesn't matter. Warlord's taking a beating, but not leaving his feet. He's finally brought down with a snapmare of all things. They're building this whole thing. Oh my God, he's taking all this punishment. He's not leaving his feet. He's not taking any bumps. All of a sudden, snapmare. So that that mystique is kind of dead. The Barbarian with a big ol' hot tag, power slam to Boris, diving headbutt by Barbarian. The Powers of Pain win the match here. I'm going to give this one star out of 4. Pretty standard match with some rough patches in the midst of it. Baron von Raschke not lasting very long in the company as their manager. He would be gone by November. Kind of surprising that a legend like von Raschke would ultimately not be used in any kind of real significant capacity in the WWF. That just seems to kind of happen sometimes with people who are legends, objective legends outside of the WWF, but when they go there, there's nothing really for them. But however, the team Powers of Pain would trade up on managing because they were feuding with Demolition for the tag titles after this, and at Survivor Series, Mr. Fuji would be Triax in Smash and join Demolition. So you could argue the Powers of Pain definitely traded up in that regard. It's time for the Brother Love Show. Well, you know, his guest for this evening is Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who of course debuted for the company the previous year at WrestleMania 3 when he acted like an idiot and cost the Killer Bees a tag team match. Then of course he would go on to win the first Royal Rumble match in 1988. That was back when it was a USA Network special. That same year he'd go on to take part in the World Championship Tournament at WrestleMania 4. But before all that happened, of course, he was arrested for DUI with the Iron Sheik in his car, which totally shattered kayfabe and almost got him fired. But what are you gonna do? Anyway, Brother Love is calling Duggan a phony. He questions Duggan's patriotism compared to that of Dino Bravo and his love of his native land of Canada. Hacksaw just says ho a lot. He says the WWF needs policing and I'm the one to do it. Then Brother Love goes, I don't see a badge on your shirt. He's poking him in the chest repeatedly. Duggan gives Brother Love the count of 5 before he gives Brother Love a 2x4 enema, so to speak, and Love just milks the count. He gets all the way up to 4 before he finally just zips on out of the ring and runs away. Pretty fun segment here. It basically set up the feud between Duggan and Dino Bravo, which would carry over into the next Survivor Series and beyond. So yeah, I mean, it was just a little talky segment in the middle of this pay-per-view, and I think it really accomplished, what it had to do. It's time for a classic, folks. Intercontinental Championship on the line as the Honky Tonk Man defends against mystery opponent. Was going to be Brutus Beefcake, but not anymore, so who's his replacement? The Honky Tonk Man says he doesn't care who it is. It's the Ultimate Warrior. He comes out like a house of fire. He damn near takes Howard Finkel off the apron as he's running into the ring, and the match is pretty much over in a jiffy. It's a couple of clotheslines, a big splash, and the match is over. It is a 31-second squiggity squash match. The 64-week, 400-some-odd day reign of the Honky Tonk Man, the record-setting single reign for the belt, is vanquished in 31 seconds by the Warrior, and he is going to be the champion through next year's WrestleMania. I'm going to give it a half star. Not much of a match, but it's a very cool moment, very historic moment of Warrior unseating the Honky Tonk Man and breaking that massive title reign in such blindingly quick fashion. After that, Bobby Heenan goes up to the announce booth to interrupt Gorilla and Billy Graham to give an update on the parties involved in the main event matchup. The crowd's chanting Weasel toward him, and you can even see Monsoon, I think he's subtly gesturing the audience to keep the chant going. You see his arms behind Heenan's back, and he's doing this kind of like crowd motioning for them to keep the chant going. Even when they weren't broadcast colleagues, they're still giving each other hell, so you gotta love the commitment. Do you smell what The Rock is cooking? The Rock, Don Muraco, that is. He makes his entrance, and they might as well just enter it by saying, here is some dubbed ass shit. It's like not his music, and it's like Howard Finkel like dubbed in post, because he's like standing perfectly still not talking, but you hear the following contest.
This contest is scheduled for one fall. Coming down the aisle.
And it's like, it's the most blatantly overdubbed network bullshit I've ever seen. He's taking on Dino Bravo, who's accompanied by Frenchie Martin. It's a rematch from WrestleMania 4, where Don won by disqualification. Frenchie Martin, what a gimmick. You couldn't really do that with too many other wrestlers. It's pretty much like the Rougeaus and Dino Bravo, and that was pretty much all you could do with him. The USA is not okay. Billy Graham, he's normally the one who accompanies Muraco to the ring, but of course he's up in the booth doing announcing here. Bravo recently tried to prove himself as the world's strongest man, but Jesse Ventura spotted him on the bench press and helped him lift the weights up. So, it's just more heel heat, where Bravo says he's so strong, but he needed somebody else to help him break the record, supposedly. A big man monkey flip by Muraco in the match. Lots of quick action early on by these two beefy dudes, which really surprised me. Muraco with some strange one-armed Irish whips in the corner. You wouldn't be seeing that shit done today. Muraco goes for Frenchie Martin, and I don't know, he swung at him, and Frenchie kind of leaned back and almost sold like he got hit. I couldn't tell if there was actual contact made. Muraco goes for a body slam, but Bravo gently kicks the referee, Tim White, who goes down for like a half second. Muraco goes for the slam again, but Bravo reverses it, hits a side slam to win the match. I'm going to give this match 1.5 stars out of 4. To me, it was a surprisingly athletic competition. I went to it thinking, oh, it's just going to be, two big, strong strong dudes just like doing forearms. They'd be slow, plodding, hoss kind of wrestling, the 80s big man style. I went into it with very low expectations, and it really surprised me in terms of the athleticism both guys had. The finish did have me scratching my head though, because like it was the incidental contact. Maybe the do-over was enough for Bravo to gain his bearings in time to reverse the second attempt. But yeah, I think it was overall a pretty good match. After a backstage interview with the special guest referee for tonight's main event, Jesse Ventura, in which he says he took DiBiase's money last week because he's no fool, we get a tag team championship match as Demolition with Mr. Fuji and Jimmy Hart take on the Hart Foundation of Bret and Jimmy Jam. Demolition won the titles from Strikeforce back in March of this year, and they are well into their record-setting 478-day title reign, which would remain unchallenged, completely intact until the New Day broke the record in 2015. The Hart Foundation recently turned face after rejecting Jimmy Hart as their manager. Hart, according to kayfabe, still owns their contract for the time, which explains why Jimmy is here. This was really Jimmy's thing for a long time. He would basically just manage whoever was feuding against Bret and Neidhart at the time. Bret gets in the ring with Smash and gets launched into the corner post. All the things that Bret Hart did in the ring, I think one of the things that stick out to me was the way he took like corner bumps. Everything just looked so intense and so impactful and brutal whenever Bret hit the corner. One of his trademark things was taking it chest first in the turnbuckle, taking a big snap bump in the back. Always looked great. No one else, as far as I could see, could do it as well as he did. Axe beating Bret up in the ropes. Like, actually gets the 5 count by the referee, but Joey Morrell does not throw the match out. That was a blatant 5 count. He had till 5 and he used it all. Demolition worked Bret's arm and shoulder for a good while. Graham is chastising Neidhart for not coming to Bret's aid on the outside. Bret does get a quick clothesline to get some space, goes to tag Anvil, but the referee misses it. A classic move there. Gets the tag moments later, and Neidhart is a house of fire. Jim with a clothesline that'll knock your dick stiff, and Smash's head clips the bottom rope on the way down, which get a bit of a double whammy there. Bret launches Anvil out of the ring. Jim hits Smash with a power slam, but Smash is able to kick out of that, as well as a double team move about a minute later. Neidhart beats up Axe and Fuji on the apron. Jimmy Hart runs back into the arena. When did he leave? I totally lost that. He tosses Axe the megaphone. He decks Bret from behind as Bret goes for a pile driver on Smash, and Demolition with the win, and they retain the tag team championships. I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 4. It was a really strong, entertaining title match. Crisp and clean, classic, heat-producing tag team spots. I really enjoyed this match. It's one of my favorites of the night. Backstage, an irate Honky Tonk Man is just livid, going nuts about his loss to the Warrior earlier in the night. He says he'll get that title back if it's the last thing he does. But you know what? There's still time, Honky Tonk. You can come back and win it any time now. Then a little bit later, we get a backstage interview with the Warrior after his title win. And I love this shot because it starts out where Warrior's surrounded by a bunch of other mid-card faces who are like, yeah, good job, man, you did it. And so then as Warrior starts talking, as time goes on, all the guys just slowly leave the shot. It's a tight shot on Warrior, and then by the time it zooms out, they're all gone. Where'd they go? They're like hearing him talk, going, fuck this guy, he's weird. Spaceships, what? Up next, the Big Boss Man, who just debuted for the company 2 months prior, and he's accompanied by the manager Slick, takes on Koko B. Ware. Koko's coming out to the dulcet tones of Pile Driver, the title track to the critically acclaimed album that came out that same year. The size difference between the two is ridiculous. The Boss Man easily has about a foot or so on Koko. The height difference is just jarring. Boss Man easily has Koko beat on a couple of occasions, but does not want the match to end just yet. He gets up from an easy pinfall. He goes to the top rope of all things. He goes for a diving attack. Koko tries to get out of the way, but he gets hit anyway, like in the back end of it. Boss Man crotches himself in the corner, and Koko mounts his comeback. A huge missile dropkick off the top rope. Goes for a cover, but Boss Man launches him off. Boss Man slam, and Big Bubba wins. Boss Man clocks Koko with the nightstick after the match ends. I'm going to give this one 2 stars. It seems like a lot because it's a really short match, but I really enjoy matches that are tight and compact but can also tell a really good story. I think this one really did that. It's like one of my favorite singles matches of the show, which I know is not saying much because the bulk of this show is tag team matches, but this one I think did a really good job establishing Big Boss Man. Koko looked good as well. So yeah, really good story. So I get 2 stars. In our next match, Hercules, who's normally accompanied by his manager Bobby Heenan, but he's a little busy with the main event preparation for the evening, takes on Jacob the Snake Up Roberts. Early in the matchup, Billy Graham just starts listing off the names of muscles.
Look at his traps, look at his delts, look at his pecs, latissimus dorsi, serratus magnusus.
Robert starts off strong against Herc, blocking a lot of his shots, even picking up the big man for a body slam. He has a headlock on him for a good minute and a half or so, and he holds on to it for a very long time, even after a back suplex. I love when that kind of spot happens. Hercules gets his heat, some some big power moves by the big man. Billy keeps calling Jake the Snake Man, and I really wish that was his official name from here on out. Roberts goes outside on the apron and he pulls Hercules out of the ring, but Herc responds in kind by pulling Jake's neck over the top rope. Jake has a comeback, gets a short arm clothesline, goes to the DDT, but gets backdropped immediately. He does manage to bust it out from out of nowhere about a minute or two later and pins Hercules after a very valiant effort. I give this one 2.5 stars. This is like I was saying, the previous match with Koko and Bossman was good for what it was, a kind of a short, sweet match with a good story. This one was a bit longer. I think it told a great story as well. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 4. My favorite singles match of the night. We get a hype video for the main event, and all I could think of when watching this is, why do they blur out the words of wrestling when talking about superstars? It's not like, every use of the word wrestling is censored on the network these days. It does seem kind of out of left field. Like, I would expect them to blur the old block logo because of the old issue with the old WWF lawsuit and everything, but not of wrestling. That's just super weird. It's main event time. The Mega Powers versus the Mega Bucks. WWF champion Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan with Miss Elizabeth take on Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant, who are accompanied by Bobby Heenan and Virgil. So let's go into the build for this match. A few weeks beforehand, DiBiase and Andre beat up on Savage as Virgil held Elizabeth and made her watch. Ooh, how dastardly. A couple weeks later, Savage selects Hulk Hogan as his partner and the Mega Powers officially form. Jesse Ventura was selected to be the guest referee, and 1 week before SummerSlam on the Brother Love show, DiBiase is blatantly seen bribing Jesse, as we discussed earlier. Add in the fact that Ventura has made his distaste of Hogan abundantly clear over the years, as well as Bobby Heenan and Virgil at ringside. How are the Mega Powers going to possibly beat these odds? How, I ask you? I think it's only appropriate that Billy Graham is doing commentary for this particular show and this particular match, because no two wrestlers on earth lifted that man's gimmick more than Jesse Ventura and Hulk Hogan, two of the big players in this matchup here. During Ventura's entrance, and he does like a Billy Graham pose in the ring, Graham just totally tears Ventura apart for that. He says, "You gotta take your shirt off and your jacket before you make that pose, brother." And he even takes the piss out of Ventura later on in the match, where he calls him, "Jesse, where did the body go, Ventura?" Like, man, there's some brilliant moments here from Graham on commentary. Before the match begins, Jesse spends a lot of time moving the tag team ropes. Like, he spends a good chunk of time like getting this situated, where he takes the tag ropes and he moves them to different corners. He gets all the wrestlers' faces. This adds nothing to the match. Like, it's one of the big mysteries of this show. Doesn't play into the match itself, doesn't play into the finish, never made it reference to again. Why did he do this? Why did he waste all this time moving the tag team ropes? It's so weird. Savage starts off against Andre for a second before DiBiase gets tagged in. Savage tags in Hogan. Things break down in a hurry and the heels get the advantage. Andre with the diving ass drop onto Hogan in the ropes. And Jesse shows a little bit of favoritism here toward the heels. Like, he has a slow count to Andre when Hogan's in the ropes. He turns his back to double teaming and he lets DiBiase choke Hogan. He is all over the ring here. It's like basically Jesse's main action in this entire match is pointing. That's the one thing he does like very well in this matchup. He gets in people's faces and he points at them. Jesse the Pointer Ventura. Hogan takes all the heat here. He gets the hot tag in on Savage and he works over DiBiase, who is the man that he beat for the championship at WrestleMania 4 earlier in the year. In comes Andre, who throws his weight around. Then Hogan gets the hot tag in. He tells Savage to go for the elbow on Andre, but the Giant gets a boot up on the way down. Andre clears the ring of Savage and Hogan. Everyone's on the apron. All the managers, Elizabeth, Heenan, Virgil. There's all a bunch of chaos here, but there's no more count because both the Mega Powers are outside. Jesse starts a count, and then there's all this confusion, commotion on the apron, so no more counting at this point by Ventura. Then the big moment, the secret weapon is unveiled. Elizabeth takes off her skirt, and it's a red bathing suit bottom. Oh my God, everyone's distracted. I cannot believe, whoa, it's a lady with a bathing suit bottom. Like, admittedly, this is a rare showing of immodesty from Elizabeth, who is seen as this pure and gentle woman, and she's always very, very lavishly dressed, and she's in the big dresses. So for her to remove any piece of clothing like that is admittedly kind of a big deal. But it's so funny how, like, oh my God, it's a red bathing suit bottom. I can't believe it. So in the distraction, Savage dives in and hits Andre out of the ring. He eats shit. Elbow drop to DiBiase, Hogan with the leg, and Jesse reluctantly counts the 3. In fact, he's delaying on the 3 count, and Savage just dives down and pushes Jesse's hand down for the 3 count to make it official. The Mega Powers win the match here. I'm going to give this one 3 stars out of 4. I just loved this match. It was great. It had a classic story. even if you remove the filter of nostalgia, because this wasn't my era. My era was much later, so it's still a lot of this is still kind of fresh to me. Watching it through these relatively fresh eyes, it was still really engaging, a really solid story, and I just think it was really fun to watch. The Mega Powers, of course, would run roughshod through the company for the remainder of the year until February or so, when they would fight the Twin Towers, Big Boss Man, who we saw earlier, teaming with Akeem here, and that's when the Mega Powers had their explosion, leading to their match at WrestleMania 5. So yeah, I mean, this was a great kind of like welcoming party for the Mega Powers, their first big test as a tag team, and I think just based on how the match went and how it was responded to, I think they passed that test with flying colors. My final grade for the inaugural SummerSlam from 1988 is a C+. Of the 10 matches that we saw on this night, 5 of them to me were good to great. You've got, the Bulldogs and Rougeaus was a really solid tag team match with a time limit draw. Ware versus Honky, as brief and a nothing burger of a match as it was still very memorable and historic, and so you got to give it credit for that. Hart Foundation versus Demolition was great. Jake Roberts versus Hercules was a kind of a hidden gem for me. And of course the main event, Mega Powers versus Mega Bucks, easily the match of the night. The 2 matches that really didn't sit well with me, the worst matches for me, were the Bolsheviks versus Powers of Pain and Brown versus Patera. But other than that, I think it was just a really, really solid show. Great opening salvo for what would become the legacy of SummerSlam. There was some bad parts, but also some really good parts too, so just kind of balanced out in the middle for me, with a little bit of favor toward the good, hence the C+ grade. Well, that's my review of the first SummerSlam, folks. I hope you enjoyed that as we get ready for the next chapter in the legacy of this pay-per-view. Thanks once again to you and Downey for nominating this show for me to watch. If you want to play a role in determining what classic shows I review for this channel, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the ability to nominate shows for me to review on this segment in the future. Next time on the classic pay-per-view review, it may be August, but I'm not going to dedicate this whole month to SummerSlam reviews. No. We're going to go to the other side. We're going to go to WCW for Beach Blast 1992. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.